I'm like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park right now. I'm like, crazy son of a bitch. You actually did it. Hey, what's up, bookworms and sleepless Mike, back today to talk a little Neil Gaiman, because today, guys, we're going to be talking about The Sandman, or the adaptation of The Sandman on Netflix. Now, as you can see, this is a series that is very, very dear to me. It was written between 1989 and 1986 by Neil Gaiman. I've been waiting for this adaptation, you guys, since I was in high school. That's when I first read it. Really, besides Watchmen, I had never read anything quite like this in my life at the time when I read it. It really kind of changed the way that I look at comics, whereas Watchmen was like a deconstruction. This kind of showed me what comics can actually be, and you can treat you like an adult kind of thing. You know, I was still to the Justice League and the superheroes and stuff at the time, and this really introduced me to Vertigo and some of the darker sides of some DC Comics characters. So yeah, something that's very, very dear to me. So going into this adaptation, obviously, I was kind of holding back my optimism, like, okay, look, hope for the best, expect the worst kind of thing, because we've seen the track record with Netflix when it comes to adapting very famous comic books. We saw what happened to Death Note. We saw what happened to Cowboy Bebop. We saw what happened to Lock and Key. Yeah, with this, I was like, look, I know that Neil Gaiman is involved, so I want to be very, very positive about it. But I also know that sometimes they don't take anything that the creators of these series have to say. Well, I'm here to say, guys, that this actually has some positive things to say about it. Now, this story, in case you don't know, is part supernatural horror, part dark fantasy, with a sprinkling of religion and superhero kind of themes into it. So as you can see at the time, it was just like a melting pot of just about everything that I could have been wanting as a sci-fi and fantasy reader. But many times this has been rumored to be adapted. I mean, they've started talking about it in the 90s. You know, and then I think that the 2000s, it kind of languished in development hell for a while. Warner Brothers does what Warner Brothers does with DC properties and just lets it languish. They don't care as long as someone else isn't making it. They don't want to do anything that's like the actual source material. But you've heard me complain about Warner Brothers on the channel many, many times. It's never changed, guys. It's always been like this. But I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I always want to call him Jordan Joseph. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he was actually attached to a project for this for a long, long time. It was in development, and then apparently he said due to creative differences he was leaving, which basically told me they didn't want to make it like it is in here. And so I applaud him for that, because when this was actually announced by Neil Gaiman back in 2019 that this had been purchased by Netflix, the deal was done, and they were going into pre-production. This was actually happening this time. Now, you want to believe it when it was coming from Neil Gaiman's mouth, but I was like, we'll see. When we started getting the casting announcements, we started getting the first production stills, and I was like, okay, it's actually happening this time, and Neil seems very, very optimistic about it. So I was trying to contain my excitement, but I gotta say, guys, did it pay off? Well, we're going to talk about it. Now, like I said, I am going to kind of cover this review of the television series. No real spoilers. Are going to be kind of vague. If I mention anything, if you haven't watched it, that's fine. I'm going to tell you if you should watch it or not, because my wife is not a reader of the story, so I get her feedback as well as someone like me who is actually married to this source material. So I'm going to kind of compare it to the source material, but not too much. Again, like I said, vague stuff at all. But I'm going to talk about the show as it compares to the source material, and then tell you kind of how my wife felt as a casual of this. Now, I think the first thing we got to do, guys, is talk about what I liked about this. Now, obviously, for me, it's the faithfulness to the source material. What is in these pages ends up on that screen in the most beautiful and unimaginable way, because this adapts the first 2 volumes of there's 10 volumes in all of the Sandman series, and as Preludes and Nocturnes and The Doll's House are the first 2. And so that's what that does here. In case you guys aren't counting at home, it's about 12 or 13% of this actual story here. So it gets about this far. You know, it's really not that much of it. So we've got a lot of growing room to do, right? But something I love, guys, is there are scenes in here that the dialogue is word from word. There's panels that are ripped straight from the page and put on the screen. I love how unapologetically fantastical this show is. They just go for it. They don't care if it's something else that people be like, I don't know if that really works on the screen. There are scenes in this comic, guys, where I'm like, there is no way they could ever put that on the big screen, and they do it. Like, I think, for example, there's a scene where Morpheus actually has like a character in the palm of his hand. I was like, that's nothing they could do it. They do it, and it's amazing. It's just beautiful the way that they do it. And it's like, of course you can do it that way. It's just unreal that they're able to pull this off on a Netflix budget, which, guys, Netflix has some money. Netflix has been known to spend some money that they don't have. You know, they've had some financial troubles as of late, and I'm happy to say they did pour some money into this. Now, look, it does still have a Netflix budget. I'm not going to shy away from that. but what they're able to do with that budget, they really, really stretch a dollar with this. And I think a big part of it is going all in on some of these very memorable scenes. Like I said, you can look at the panel and look at direct comparison to what they put on the screen here and say, wow, they are fans of this material. Now, I knew that Neil Gaiman was involved in this, but I don't know how much. He's not the showrunner or anything, but I kind of feel like he was standing on the shoulder of the showrunner here, guys, because it's damn near word for word in a lot of this. And I went into this expecting, okay, if this is 65% of what I recognize, I'll be happy. I would say this is about 95% faithful, at least through the first 2 volumes of the story. And that's incredible, guys, because there are a couple of differences here and there. There are some different things that some characters do that they don't do. They've given some things to other characters, things like that. But again, if you look at the good versus the bad on this, overwhelmingly positive, to the point where I'm just like completely blown away. I never expected this at all. But there's so many things that they just go for. Like I said, so many fantastical things that you wouldn't usually see. You would usually want to see, big screen. They want to kind of shy away from that. It's kind of keep it grounded a little bit. Grounded is a word they always try to use with sci-fi and fantasy. With this one, like for example, anytime there's a story with a talking animal, they either they just don't talk, or it's kind of like a telepathic link or something like that. Matthew, the Raven in this, not only does he talk, he actually moves his beak. These are things that I think that only Chronicles of Narnia has actually made it look as good as this looks. Now, I'm not wild about his voice. And here's the thing about that is no problems with Patton Oswalt. I think Patton Oswalt's fine. I know he's a big fan of the property, so I think that's really cool that as a fan, he gets to be participating in this. That's got to be just like a dream come true. For me, though, this story is like everyone on the show, too, basically talks with a British accent. And so Matthew just talking like just like a New Yorker is just kind of like weird. But again, it's really cool that they just kind of go for it. But that's something I'm not really crazy about. But I also like that each episode kind of covers a single issue of the comic, or it combines 2 issues into one, and it never feels rushed. There are things that I thought for sure this show would not even cover, or it would greatly condense, and they do it. Like I think, for example, like the diner issue, I thought that would either be gone or just reduced big time. But it's not. It's all there, and it might have a couple differences here and there, but the concept and theme of that issue are still very much prevalent. So they're capturing the heart and the soul of the story, which is the most important thing, I think, for a reader. But sometimes they combine different issues into, like, that aren't sequential. Like, for example, what is it? She Spreads Her Wings and Men of Good Fortune. They combine those. I think it's like issue 6 and 13, I believe. And they combine those, but it works so well the way they flow it into it. And I'll say episode 6, guys, probably the best episode of the entire season. That's one of those where I knew what was coming, and it still hit me in the feels. In fact, my wife did cry during that episode. So that's something that I think that you'll see if you peruse the internet, is that readers and the casuals that have not read this are liking the show almost as much as each other, which is rare, incredibly rare when it comes to adaptation. So it's an enigma, I think. It just kind of goes into showing how much they've really put heart and soul and thought into adapting this title. Another thing I like is it is an unabashedly adult series. It is very R-rated or TVMA, whatever you want to call it. There is some horrific stuff in this. I said that I would call it supernatural horror for most of the series. There are people being decapitated. There are bodies exploding. There is murder, there is suicide, there is self-harm, as I think the warning before the episodes give you. These things are all in the comic, and they are all on the show. So I'm glad they didn't kind of drift away from that. Something that you're not really into, I understand. I'm just saying, as someone who, obviously is clearly an awful person, because I love seeing bad things happen to these people as they were written, that's something that obviously I'm looking for, and I'm glad they didn't really shy away from. But there's some things that have been softened, too. Like I think of the episode Passengers. That's another one. Actually, I don't know if that was the episode. That was the issue. But the content from the issue Passengers that makes it on the show, it's where they're in the car together. That's an episode that, again, I thought that would not really cover as much of that with John and with Rosemary, but they do. But they do soften it just a bit. I do think they do an incredible job with Dr. Destiny, or John, as they call him on the show. That is something that they kind of did ground. I'm kind of glad because Dr. Destiny, and it really does just look like Skeletor. So I'm glad they just used David Thewlis, who was excellent, but I'll get to in a minute. But that episode, that is kind of softened a little bit. The resolution at the end of that is much, much more positive than it is in the comic. So little things like that, little changes. I think they do some things better, some things it's for the worse, but for the most part, some changes they do is better. Like, for example, that She Spreads Her Wings episode. I think that's better than the actual comic is, and that's one of my favorite issues. So that just tells you how great they are at adapting this. And it's amazing because you hear a lot of times about how we've got to modernize this, make it more safer. You got to realize that this story was written in the 90s, so there's going to be some things you look at and you're like, oh, wow, I don't know if you could really do that today. And I think they handle it in a way on the show with a lot of that stuff. Now, they do some stuff that's still like, wow, I can't believe they actually left that in there. Like, there's a specific scene with a baby. I was stunned they left that in. But you know what? It brings so much weight to the story, so I'm glad that they left it in. There are some things, like I said, they do soften some things, but they go full bore with some other stuff. They give some characters some extra time. Like, for example, the Corinthian does not actually in the story, I think, until like issue 10 or so, and he's in this entire first season. And I think that's just kind of like they needed a big bad for season 1 kind of thing, so that's why they did that, and I'm fine with that. I understand there's some things that they've got to do on TV that they can't really do, when you're reading it. So I get why they made some of those changes. But I'll talk about some of the actors now. Obviously, Tom Sturridge as Dream or Morpheus. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. I won't lie, when he was cast, I was like, he looks a little young, because I do think that Morpheus in the comic does, I don't want to say old, he kind of has that ageless look, but he looks older than Tom Sturridge does. But I'll say this guy is brilliant, and oh my God, his voice is amazing. I don't know if that's his actual voice. I've never seen him in anything else before this. I don't know if his actual voice or if they're using some kind of voice modulation, but if you could rip the audio from my head when I have read this story before, that's what I hear. So that is amazing, that voice that guy has. And yeah, every scene that he's in on the screen, it's just, he completely dominates the scene, no matter who he's acting opposite of or what. He is just brilliant casting, and bravo. I mean, let's be honest, if you got that character wrong, the whole series isn't going to work. So good on them for picking the right guy, and I was initially wrong. I do use the Heath Ledger rule. If you don't know that, the Heath Ledger rule is where I say, let's see them on the screen before I decide if they're good or not, and I'm glad I did that here, because this guy is great. So I'm as guilty as anyone being like, it's not what I imagine when I see it, but I do say, let's see how it turns out, just like we did with Heath Ledger, because we were all level-headed when Heath Ledger got cast as Joker, weren't we? Yeah, the voice, David Thewlis. Now, this is Professor Lupin, for some people who don't know. David Thewlis as John Dee, or Dr. Destiny. He was just mesmerizing on this. Something I felt like this did better than the comic is it gives him so much more depth than just, I'm an evil bad guy. It gave him so much more purpose, and it made that diner episode so good. And of course, the resolution of that even better. And that's a scene that is really, literally, guys, is ripped straight from the page. It's just so damn good. But Jenna Coleman, I got to bring this up, as Joanna Constantine. Now, I was just like everyone else. Oh my God, why are you gender flipping my dude, John Constantine? Now, look, if you guys don't know here, John Constantine, top 5 superhero character for me all time. And I don't call him a superhero. He's obviously a very, very damaged character, but a top 5 comic book character for me all time. I love Hellblazer. The Garth Ennis run is one of the best things ever put to page. Get it if you haven't. This volume is amazing. It's huge. It's very heavy, but it's so good. So the whole thing with that, guys, is they could not get the rights to use John Constantine. Now, Neil Gaiman himself cleared this up. He said he knew that no one was going to listen, but it did clear it up that the reason that they did that was not because, they wanted to not have John Constantine in there. They just couldn't. It's a mess with rights when it comes to a lot of these DC characters. That's why you don't see very many of them in here. But John Constantine was one I was very, very heartbroken to see not in this, because that's one of my favorite characters, and I love his appearance in here. The good news is, what's her name? From Doctor Who, Jenna Coleman. Jenna Coleman was very good. I like that they didn't just try to basically make her John. She talks like John. She has the same kind of swagger as John. So I go with that. Her coat's a little different than John's, but it's kind of, you feel like it's a hat tip. What they could get away with without getting in trouble. But I think it's handled very, very well. I think she plays the part good. They keep the story the same. That's what's really, really cool about it. They don't really change a lot about it. I do like that. And I do think that her and Dream have some really good chemistry together when they are together. Charles Dance is always great. I mean, everyone's going to see Tywin Lannister now. I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. Roderick Burgess. When I saw he was playing Roderick, I was actually kind of sad, because he's not a huge character in the story. And I thought, that's such an amazing actor to kind of, lose as early as we do in the show, because he's really, guys, he's in the comic for like 12 pages, if that. So the fact that we got him as long as he did was really, really cool. I just wish it had been a different actor there. I can't think of her name right now. The actress who plays Death, mesmerizing. She is just fantastic. She's one of the things that makes that episode so good. And that's another one of those castings that people are like, I don't know about that. Gwendolyn Christie as Lucifer, really good. Now, elephant in the room, I got to address it here. A lot of people have problems with the castings. They don't like that they're gender flipped. They don't like that they're race flipped, things like that. Here's what I'll say about that, guys. I've never gave a damn about that if it doesn't change the story. That's just me. Sure, do I want everything to look 100% like I read it? Absolutely. Does it ruin the story for me? No, not at all. And these performances are amazing. They're just amazing. So I've got no problems with it all. See, the thing with Lucifer is I always kind of look like David Bowie, and David Bowie always kind of looked androgynous to me. So I always looked at Lucifer kind of androgynous in that story. Same with Desire. So I've got no problem really with that casting at all. I do wish the hair had been a little different because the hair did look really feminine. But again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. I love that he calls her Lightbringer. That's really awesome. Lucifer, Morningstar, just great stuff. It's just, again, straight from the page, guys. I love that they have their high stakes D&D game. But again, I don't have a problem with any of these castings. If you really just can't get past some of the gender flip. For example, Lucian. Lucian is now Lucien, and it is a black female character. Changes absolutely nothing about the character. Nothing. Go in the comic and show me what it changes. Nothing at all. So it doesn't bother me like it bothers other people. Again, 96% faithful to the source material. To me, that's just incredible. I would take that every time. I'll take some actors or actresses not looking like I pictured them or like they were drawn. I'm fine with that. But again, another thing, guys, I think the soundtrack is amazing. I hope that they sell it on its own. It's just so dark fantasy. I love it. It sounds almost like something like you would have heard like from Legend, the old Ridley Scott movie. It's just so damn mesmerizing and fantastical. I love it. It just fits so perfectly. And when I talk about that episode number 6, the soundtrack, they're so good, guys. The soundtrack alone almost will bring you to tears. It's really that good. But it's just the majesty of this show. Like I said, it's a Netflix budget, but it looks gorgeous for the most part. It looks incredible. I love the way they portray dreams. I love the way Gregory looked. I thought Gregory would get left out because that's a lot of money. And they did Gregory, and it looks awesome. And Goldie looks adorable. So, I mean, Cain and Abel in here are so good. I don't have a ton of problem with any of these performances. And again, guys, this has kind of blown me away because I never expected it to be this faithful. And I got to say, the costuming wasn't as bad as I was expecting either. The costuming's actually quite good. No real complaints there. I look at a show like Wheel of Time, which had a much bigger budget than this. And that hair and that costuming does not look good. The wigs on here look great. So I don't know. I don't mean to keep picking on Wheel of Time, but that's the one I'm going to because, it's a big deal in the fantasy community. Let's talk about what I didn't like. Now, nothing's perfect, right? What I didn't like. Now, this is going to be me being a picky comic book nerd here. The lack of DC characters and locations. Like I said, John Constantine, Etrigan, Scarecrow, Martian Manhunter, etc. You do see Arkham Asylum numerous times in here. I understand why they're not here. One, it can create confusion to people if they aren't big-time DC readers. I get that. 2, there's the rights issue. 3, doesn't change a ton. Again, it doesn't change very much. Johanna Constantine is actually in the comic, just in a different time period. But, things like that, it's fine. I can live without it. But, as a big-time DC Comics fan, I would have loved to have seen it. I mean, you even get the Justice Society of America and the Justice League. Even if it's just mentioned, you do get lots of things about it in here. But again, if they want to kind of keep this isolated, make it feel welcoming to new people, I get why they made the change. It does still look relatively cheap sometimes, guys. It does look like they spent a lot of their money on the special effects, and so sometimes it does look like it is actors in a backroom set. And again, if you just kind of use some escapism, I think you'll be fine. But Game of Thrones isn't going to wow you with its set pieces. What it's going to wow you with is just the majesty of it. I think it does that perfect, and I'll take that trade-off every time. If the costuming, the wigs, the actors, and then of course, the special effects all look great, I'll let go of a set piece now and then looking kind of small, not quite as grand or epic in scope. But if this is a success, I wouldn't mind seeing them put a little more money into it next time. So that is definitely something I'm going to give it a knock for. Story changes and additions. Now, they are there. There are some things they changed. Hector and Jed are kind of have some stuff that's like, I don't really know how I feel about that. Rose has got some things. I'm like, I wouldn't have done it that way. But nothing that's really world-breaking to me. It's something that I feel like they had to leave open for viewers. There's lots of things in the story that I feel like the fun of the story is figuring this stuff out on your own. And because you're introducing, casuals into this world that can be very confusing at first, you have to explain that for them. You have to hold their hand, especially like I think about the first 5 minutes of the show. That stuff's like, wow, you just kind of gave everything away, really. But I get why you have to do stuff like that on the TV. So with adaptation, I'll let some things like that go. I just think as a reader, that was kind of fun figuring that thing out on their own. Now, they are doing the sibling thing well, not letting you know about who all the siblings are. I think they're doing that very, very well. Corinthian, like I said, they felt like they needed a big bad for season 1. I get why they have that there, why he has such an expanded role. Thankfully, the actor is terrific, so I have no problem getting more of Corinthian. But it was one of those things like, yeah, I don't think he's really in this story that much. But again, you do need, if this was a season 1 kind of outline, they did need kind of a big bad for the season. So I get why they did that. But for like I said, for the readers, it's going to kind of annoy us. But really, again, guys, we'll take being annoyed than just outright destroyed like we were with like Lock and Key. Lock and Key got just like completely castrated because they wanted to make it for tweens. They wanted to get that younger crowd. They didn't care about the readers. This clearly cares about the readers. You know what? If it's good content, all ages will watch it. That's kind of what I think they're going for. Whereas Lock and Key really, really just disappointed me with that. This is Lock and Key not. I mean, this really is very, very faithful, and it is very adult. And so I'm quite happy with that trade-off every single time. So some final thoughts, guys. Look, this wildly exceeded my expectations, if you can't tell. Very, very happy. And I went into it with super cautious optimism. I've been kind of keeping an eye on it, but I haven't even been talking about it on the channel very much. I didn't even do like a review of this because I was like, it's just, I feel like it's going to disappoint me like Lock and Key did because I was so excited for Lock and Key. But like I said, guys, I don't know how involved Neil Gaiman is with this, but after seeing it, I've got to think he's on the set and he's telling them every time they think about making a change, he's like, I wouldn't do that. That doesn't work because of this, and this. Now, I hope this is a new direction because like I said, we've seen some of these adaptations fail because they don't take anything that the creator made to heart. They don't act like it's important to them to actually put those things in an adaptation. So I hope this is kind of like that, or like Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank did with The Expanse, where they're actually on the writing team, making sure that story stays where it's supposed to go, but doing changes that you have to make it for television. Again, I hope this is something that is a new trend with adaptation, keeping the creators involved, listening to them. You don't know more than the creator of something. So I think that Neil Gaiman has enough stroke and enough people hold this series just beloved to them that the people involved with making it, it was very important for them to do this right. And I'm very, very happy with that. I can't explain how happy I am with this, guys. And I cannot tell you how much I'm praying that you guys will watch it. Because this, like I said, is about 12% of the story. I'd like to get the good 5 or 6 seasons to tell this whole thing. So I need you guys to watch it. I know everyone right now after Stranger Things are like, I'm going to go ahead and cancel Netflix. Get it back and watch this, please, because it's not going to get more. Netflix is not going to continue to pour the money into the show that it takes or give it an increased budget if you guys aren't watching it. But it gives me hope, like I said, for the future. And maybe we can do stuff in the future of an adaptation of something like a saga or something like that, which everybody says is unfilmable as well. I mean, even Matthew K. Vaughn said he made that to be unfilmable. Maybe we can get something like that and we can get it faithfully done. So I think if you can adapt Sandman, you can adapt anything. I really don't see anything that can't be adapted if you can do this. And this has been successfully adapted as a fan of the comic book, guys. So extremely happy, but I want to know what you guys think. I'm so excited this finally happened, and I want to know how casuals and readers alike. If you're a reader of the comic, do you love it as much as I did? Are you anxious for more? If you are a casual, what did you think? Did it hit you in the same way that it hit some other readers, or as well as it hit my wife? I'd really, really love to know. So again, a property that is very, very dear to me, and I want to see more. So guys, read it if you haven't. Please dig into the story. It's so good. These are amazing collections. They're very expensive, but they're amazing. But you can get it in multiple formats. They got it digital, all that stuff. But please watch the show because I would like to get more of it. So that's all I got for today, guys. Why don't you drop in the comments and let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you there.